let's focus on faith now. Is faith compatible with science and reason? In other words, can we have a science-based or reason-based faith? Like, what is faith? Maybe that's a better way of.
Yeah.
What is faith, and how does it relate to
I think
science?
people have in modern times, I think, have a warped view of faith. It's like the Miracle on 34th Street version of faith, where faith is believing when common sense tells you not to. That's a line from the
Oh,
Miracle on 34th movie. And I think that's what a lot of people think faith is. It's,
okay.
you have no reason to believe it, but you believe
Oh.
it anyway. And that's not really the kind of faith that the Bible talks about. The Bible talks about you have faith for a reason. There's a reason why we believe Jesus died for our sins, and that's because he rose again. And the apostles saw him, right?
In the flesh.
In the flesh.
After he had
after he'd resurrected. So when they're talking about faith, they're not saying we believe Jesus rose from the dead with no evidence, right? Because they actually saw it. They saw him raised from the dead. When they're talking about faith, they're saying we believe Jesus's death did this. It paid the price for our sins, and the reason we believe it is because he rose from the dead in the way that he said he would.
Right.
So faith is believing something. It was something that we haven't seen yet, but we're believing it for a reason. It's you sit down in a chair with the faith that that chair is going to hold you up because you've sat down in that chair before. So you have
okay,
reason
but I personally haven't met this Jesus dude. I mean, how can I trust 2,000 years ago, some dude named Paul,
Right. So then you look at the evidence
Paul.
that we ask is, are the accounts in the Bible reliable? And then we go into, all right, is there reason to believe that the authors were reliable? And we can look at their lives, right? And we have independent records of their lives. We have non-biblical historians that are writing about early Christians. So we can look at evidence like that and say, all right, there's evidence that these Bible authors were reliable because of X, Y, and Z. They had no reason to, like for instance, they had no reason to invent these stories because they were persecuted for these stories, right? They had no reason to completely change their lives because their lives were looking like this beforehand, right? Paul was an up-and-coming guy in the group of the Pharisees before he became a Christian. He had no reason to change career paths.
Can you explain what a Pharisee is for people who aren't familiar with the Bible?
It's an old Jewish religious sect.
So he was a rabbi.
Yeah, kind of like a rabbi.
Okay.
Yeah, he was a very holy Jewish scholar, and he was someone that was high-ranking in this sect of the Jewish population.
And in fact, he persecuted Christians.
Yeah,
right?
he was persecuted. So he had no reason to change faith, right? So it's reasons like that you look at their lives and say you have no reason. There was no reason for them to do these things unless the events that they saw actually were true. And so we put our faith in stuff like that for those types of reasons. Science is one method of determining truth, and it's the method of developing experiments and tests to determine, like I keep dropping the pen at certain heights and timing how long it takes to hit the ground, and from that determine the mathematical relationship of how fast it's going and how that relates to gravity and all that stuff, right? That's what science is. We are determining these laws because we have this fundamental faith that the universe consists of unchanging physical laws.
Right.
And that itself is a statement of faith. We believe it because we have seen these unchanging laws in the past, because we dropped that pen from the same height over and over again, and it keeps happening time and time again.
Okay, but isn't that different from, there was this guy that existed and we have some historical records. We can't reproduce that over and over again. If someone disagrees with the manuscript that, Paul even existed,
right,
how are they to trust it?
Well, then you can't examine any history from a scientific perspective. That's why we're not examining history through a scientific lens. We're examining history through a historical lens, and that's a different fundamental thing. That would be like forensics or something like that, right? So science is about determining what are the current laws that govern the universe.
Right.
History is about determining what are the events that happened in the past. And those are two fundamentally different questions that they're answering, two fundamentally different methods of exploring truth. And it's not that one is superior to the other. It's that one is asking and answering fundamentally different questions.
So it's not like you're going to say, I can use the scientific method to prove as a Christian that Jesus existed.
Right.
That's not a thing.
You can't kill a Jewish carpenter and throw him in a tomb and wait 3 days to see if he rises from the dead to reproduce whether or not Jesus rose from the dead. It doesn't work that way, right?